I'm a 42-year-old guy. Married for 14 years. 2 kids. Suburban house, decent job, normal life. The kind of life I used to think meant I'd somehow made it. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this. But here I am, anonymous, typing into the void because I don't know where else to put this pain. Before everything fell apart, my marriage felt stable. Not perfect, but solid. My wife, Laura, and I had our issues like any long-term couple. Stress from work, raising kids, financial worries, exhaustion. But I genuinely believed we were a team. I trusted her completely. I trusted our family. I trusted the version of reality I was living in. Looking back, I realize how much comfort I took in routine. School drop-offs. Dinner together most nights. Netflix on the couch. Occasional arguments about dumb things like dishes or screen time for the kids. Nothing that screamed, "Your entire life is about to implode." Laura had been more anxious than usual for about a year. Trouble sleeping. Mood swings. Crying spells she couldn't explain. I suggested therapy, thinking I was being supportive. She resisted at first, then eventually agreed. She said she needed to talk to someone who wasn't me, someone objective. I was proud of her for taking that step. I helped her find a marriage counselor who also did individual sessions. He came highly recommended. Middle-aged, calm, soft-spoken, reassuring. The kind of guy who makes you instantly trust him. That was my first mistake. At the time, I truly believed we were doing something healthy. Proactive. Mature. I had no idea I was basically holding the door open for my own destruction. Life felt normal. That's the scariest part. Because I had absolutely no idea what was already happening behind my back. Laura started seeing him once a week. She'd come home saying the sessions were hard but good. That he helped her understand her stress better. That she felt lighter afterward. I was relieved. I wanted her to feel okay. I wanted to be a good husband. A couple months later, he suggested we do joint sessions. I agreed without hesitation. I remember sitting in his office for the first time, noticing how relaxed Laura looked around him. How she smiled more easily. I told myself I was imagining things. He asked a lot about our communication, our sex life, our conflicts. Normal stuff. He nodded a lot. Took notes. Used phrases like secure attachment and healthy baseline. After a few sessions, he said something that stuck with me. Honestly, you two have one of the strongest marriages I see. Most couples come in already falling apart. You're nowhere near that. I clung to that sentence like a life raft. Laura seemed to pull away from me at home, but I blamed stress. She started guarding her phone more. Turning the screen away. Taking longer showers. Texting late at night. I noticed. I hated myself for noticing. I told myself not to be paranoid. I didn't want to be that controlling, suspicious husband. Sometimes she'd say things he supposedly told her. He says I need to focus on myself more. He says I've spent too long prioritizing everyone else. I nodded, supportive, even when it felt like a quiet wedge was being driven between us. I trusted him. I trusted her. I trusted the process. Meanwhile, my wife was going to therapy to talk about me. And getting closer to him. I just didn't know it yet. The first real crack showed up as something so small I almost feel stupid admitting it. Laura forgot her phone on the kitchen counter one morning while she was in the shower. It buzzed. I wasn't trying to snoop. I honestly thought it might be one of the kids' schools calling. The screen lit up with a message preview. I've been thinking about you all morning. No name saved. Just a number. My stomach dropped, but my brain rushed to explain it away. Maybe a friend. Maybe a group chat. Maybe nothing. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention it. I hated myself for looking at all. I hated myself more for remembering every detail of that message. After that, I started noticing patterns. She suddenly needed space, at night. She stopped initiating sex completely. When I touched her, she'd flinch sometimes, like she was startled. Other times she'd force a smile and say she was just tired. Our counselor kept telling us we were solid. That what we were experiencing was normal fluctuation. That we had strong foundations. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Laura started staying late after sessions. She said sometimes he ran over. Or they talked about coping strategies. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was a professional. A therapist. Someone bound by ethics. Meanwhile, my gut was screaming. I ignored it. I told myself love meant trust. I didn't realize trust can be weaponized. And I definitely didn't realize the man reassuring me every week was already sleeping with my wife. The moment everything shifted wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No catching them in bed. It was quieter. Worse somehow. Laura started picking fights over nothing. The way I loaded the dishwasher. The tone I used with the kids. How I breathed, practically. It felt like she was building a case against me, stacking tiny grievances into something bigger. I kept apologizing, even when I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. I felt like I was constantly failing some invisible test. One night after a joint session, I asked her directly if she was still in love with me. I'd never asked that in 14 years. She paused for too long. Then said, "I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out." I felt like I'd been punched. The counselor jumped in smoothly. Said it was normal to question feelings during growth. Said love evolves. Said we shouldn't panic. Then he looked straight at me and said, "From an outside perspective, your marriage is still very strong." I remember gripping the arm of the chair, holding on to those words. Laura barely looked at me on the drive home. She stared out the window like she was already somewhere else. That night she slept on the couch. She said she needed space. I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we'd gone from stable to fragile without any clear explanation. I still didn't suspect an affair. I just thought I was losing my wife. I didn't realize I'd already lost her. And I definitely didn't realize who she'd lost herself to. The suspicion finally turned real about 2 weeks later. Laura was in the shower again. Her phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed. Over and over. I told myself not to look. I stood there arguing with myself like a crazy person. Then I picked it up. There was no lock screen preview this time, but her notifications were showing message counts from one unsaved number. 12 unread texts. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I wish I could say I respected her privacy. I didn't. I opened the messages. They weren't graphic. That almost made it worse. They were intimate in a quieter way. "I miss you. Last night meant a lot to me. I hate pretending in sessions. We have to be careful." One message hit me like a brick. "I've never felt this connected to anyone before." I felt nauseous. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself this was some elaborate misunderstanding. Maybe emotional cheating. Maybe fantasy. Maybe someone from work. Then I scrolled up. There were references to your husband and our sessions. My ears started ringing. I couldn't hear the shower anymore. It felt like my body went cold from the inside out. When Laura came out, I was still sitting there holding her phone. She took one look at my face and knew. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She just whispered, "I'm so sorry." 14 years collapsed into that sentence. The person she was cheating with wasn't a coworker. Wasn't an ex. Wasn't a stranger. It was our marriage counselor. The man who'd been telling me everything was fine. The man I trusted with my marriage. The man who helped destroy it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even stand up. I just sat there holding her phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Laura kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over, like it was a spell that might undo what she'd done. I asked her how long. She hesitated, which already told me everything. Then she said, "A few months." I asked when it stopped being professional. She said she didn't know. First it was just talking. Then texting. Then emotional. Then physical. I asked where? She said his office after hours. Sometimes his car. Once a hotel. I felt like I was going to throw up. I asked her if she loved him. She cried harder. That was also an answer. I asked her how she could sit across from me in therapy, listening to him tell me we were strong, knowing she was sleeping with him. She said she was confused. That she felt seen. That he understood her. That he said our marriage was safe enough to explore her feelings. That part shattered something in me permanently. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It was layered. Systematic. Two people who knew me, who looked me in the eyes, who watched me struggle, decided I was disposable. I realized in that moment I hadn't just lost my wife. I'd lost my reality. Everything I thought was true was now questionable. And I didn't know how to exist inside that kind of uncertainty. The next day felt unreal. Like I was walking through someone else's life. Laura begged me not to tell anyone. She said it would ruin the counselor's career. That she was scared. That she wanted to fix our marriage. Hearing her worry about protecting him made something inside me go numb. I couldn't understand how she could still prioritize him after what they'd done. I asked if she planned to stop seeing him. She said yes. Immediately. She said she'd block his number. She said she'd do anything. I watched her type out a message ending things. I watched her block him. It didn't make me feel better. It felt performative. Too late. Like watching someone lock the door after the house already burned down. I didn't go to work. I sat in my car for hours in a parking lot, staring at nothing. I kept replaying every therapy session in my head, every reassuring nod, every time he told me I was a good husband. I wondered how many times they'd looked at each other while I was talking. How many private jokes existed that I'd never know about. When I came home, Laura tried to hug me. I stepped away. She started sobbing. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just emptiness. I realized I couldn't even look at her without seeing his hands on her. That image still lives in my head. It probably always will. I confronted him 3 days later. Not in some dramatic movie way. I emailed his office pretending I wanted an emergency individual session. He agreed. Sitting in that same room where he dissected my marriage felt surreal. He smiled when I walked in. Asked how I was doing. I almost laughed. I told him I knew. His face went pale instantly. No denial. No confusion. Just silence. Then he said, "I never intended for this to happen." That sentence still makes me sick. I asked how long he'd been sleeping with my wife. He said it evolved naturally. I asked how he could ethically continue counseling us. He said he believed he could. Separate roles. I asked if he told Laura our marriage was strong to keep me calm. He didn't answer. I told him I was reporting him. He begged me not to. Said it would destroy his family, his children, his practice. I remember thinking, funny how he suddenly cared about families. I walked out shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. Reporting him didn't make me feel powerful. It didn't make me feel better. It just made everything feel more real. The man who manipulated my marriage was real. The affair was real. And my life was permanently altered. Telling Laura I'd confronted him started another war. She panicked. She screamed that I was vindictive. That I was trying to ruin her life too. I couldn't believe the audacity. Somehow I had become the villain for refusing to protect the people who destroyed me. She begged me to reconsider. Said we could handle it privately. Said dragging it into the open would make reconciliation impossible. That word. Reconciliation. Like it was still a realistic option. We started sleeping in separate rooms. The kids sensed something was wrong. We told them we were. working through adult problems. Watching their little faces try to process that nearly broke me. I started having panic attacks. Full bodies shaking. Shortness of breath. Random crying in the shower so nobody would hear me. Laura oscillated between guilt and defensiveness. One day she'd say she hated herself. The next she'd say I hadn't been emotionally available enough. That our marriage had been stagnant. That she'd felt lonely for years. Every time she said that, it felt like she was rewriting history to justify what she did. I began questioning everything about myself. Was I a bad husband? Was I blind? Was I boring? Was I impossible to love? I didn't recognize the man in the mirror anymore. I was exhausted. Empty. Humiliated. And somehow still in the same house with the person who caused all of it. People always ask why I didn't just leave immediately. I ask myself that too. The honest answer is I was paralyzed. 14 years doesn't disappear overnight. Neither do kids, shared finances, memories, inside jokes, or the stupid hope that maybe the person you loved is still in there somewhere. Laura started pushing for couples therapy again. With a different counselor this time. The irony almost made me scream. She said she wanted to rebuild trust. She said she chose me. I never felt chosen. I felt like the consolation prize after her fantasy blew up. Every session felt like psychological torture. I had to sit there and calmly discuss boundaries and communication, while my brain replayed messages between her and another man. Sometimes I'd dissociate completely. Just stare at the wall and nod. She wanted reassurance. She wanted to know if I still loved her. I didn't know how to answer. Love had become tangled with rage and grief and disgust. I started drinking more than I should have. Nothing extreme, but enough to notice. Enough to worry myself. Sleep became a mess. Some nights I slept 2 hours. Some nights I didn't sleep at all. The house felt haunted. Not by ghosts. By memories that suddenly meant nothing. By promises that were now lies. By a future I no longer believed in. I was still technically married. But I felt utterly alone. What finally pushed me toward leaving wasn't another discovery or fight. It was something quieter. One night Laura fell asleep on the couch watching TV. Her phone was on the coffee table. It lit up. A notification from an unknown number. My heart stopped. I didn't pick it up. That's the part that surprised me. I just stared at the phone and realized something inside me had snapped. I didn't care enough anymore to investigate. I didn't have the energy to confirm another betrayal. I already knew what she was capable of. That knowledge alone was enough. The next morning I told her I wanted to separate. She cried. She begged. She promised she'd never talk to him again. She swore the message was spam. She said we were making progress. I listened politely. Calmly. Almost gently. Then I repeated myself. I moved into a small apartment a few weeks later. It was depressing and quiet and empty. But it was mine. Telling the kids was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My son asked if it was his fault. That nearly killed me. Laura and I started co-parenting. Civil on the surface. Strained underneath. I didn't feel relief. I felt grief. But also a strange, fragile sense of safety. At least the bleeding had stopped. Even if the wound was still wide open. It's been almost 2 years since I moved out. The counselor lost his license. That should feel like justice. It doesn't. Nothing undoes what happened. Nothing gives me back the version of myself who believed in unconditional trust. Laura and I are officially divorced now. She's in another relationship. I don't ask with who. I don't want to know. We only talk about the kids. Some days I function fine. I go to work. I cook. I exercise. I laugh at dumb videos. From the outside, I probably look healed. Inside is messy. I struggle with intimacy. When someone shows interest in me, my first instinct is suspicion. I assume there's a hidden angle. I hate that about myself. I replay moments I wish I could redo. Things I wish I'd noticed earlier. Things I wish I'd said. I still feel embarrassed. Like I was the only person in the room who didn't know the joke. I've been in individual therapy. A good therapist. A professional one. He says betrayal trauma can fundamentally change how your brain processes safety. That tracks. I don't hate Laura anymore. I don't love her either. She feels like a stranger who happens to share children with me. Sometimes that realization hurts more than anger ever did. Because it means something truly died. And it's not coming back. There are nights I lie awake thinking about how carefully everything was constructed. How many lies had to stack on top of each other for months without collapsing. How many times they both had opportunities to stop and didn't. I think about the version of me who sat in that office talking about my fears and insecurities, believing the man across from me had my best interests at heart. I feel a deep, old shame about that. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I was so open, so exposed, so unaware. I've had people tell me I'm strong. I don't feel strong. I feel permanently altered. I don't trust easily anymore. Not just romantically. In general. I question motives. I scan for inconsistencies. I hate living like this, but I don't know how to turn it off. Dating feels impossible most days. I've tried. I compare everyone to a ghost. Or I wait for the moment they reveal who they really are. I miss believing in love the way I used to. Not naive fairy tale love. Just stable, boring, safe love. The kind I thought I had. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel that again. Sometimes I'm scared the answer is no. And that scares me more than being alone. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what my biggest fear was, I would have said something happening to my kids. I never would have said the two people I trusted most conspiring against me. That kind of betrayal rewires your definition of danger. I don't tell many people this story. A handful of close friends. My therapist. That's it. I still feel humiliated. I know logically it wasn't my fault. Emotionally, I still feel defective. I catch myself wondering what he gave her that I didn't. Was it attention? Validation? Novelty? Power imbalance? Probably all of it. None of those answers actually help. What hurts most isn't just that she cheated. It's that she cheated while pretending to work on our marriage. It's that she watched me try. It's that she let me be vulnerable in front of the man she was sleeping with. That level of cruelty feels impossible to fully comprehend. I don't wish revenge. I don't fantasize about karma. I mostly just wish for peace. Some days I have it. Some days I don't. Healing isn't linear. It's circular. You revisit the same pain with slightly different understanding each time. I'm still somewhere in that loop. Still trying to make sense of a story that has no satisfying ending. Just scars. I don't know what the moral of this story is. I don't know if there's a lesson that neatly wraps this up. If anything, I've learned that you can do everything right and still get destroyed. You can be loyal. You can communicate. You can show up. And it still might not be enough. That's a terrifying truth. I don't regret loving my wife. I regret who she turned out to be. I regret trusting someone who abused their position of power. I regret not listening to my gut sooner. But I refuse to regret caring. Because if I let this turn me into someone cold and cruel, then they took even more from me than they already did. I'm not healed. I'm not whole. But I'm alive. I'm functioning. I'm slowly building a life that doesn't revolve around betrayal. If you're reading this and something feels off in your relationship, don't automatically assume you're crazy. Don't automatically assume you're the problem. Pay attention. Ask hard questions. Protect yourself. Some people can look you in the eye and lie without flinching. I know that now. And I will carry that knowledge with me for the rest of my life.